The year was 1973. Clint Eastwood, the most dangerous man in Hollywood, walked into NBC studios in Burbank with murder in his eyes. Not the fake kind, not the Hollywood kind, real fury. For 3 months, Johnny Carson had been making jokes about him on The Tonight Show, calling him a squinting cowboy who got lucky, saying he had 2 expressions, angry and angrier, telling America that Clint Eastwood couldn't act his way out of a paper bag. 40 million people laughed every night. Clint Eastwood wasn't laughing. He had clawed his way up from nothing, dug swimming pools for rich people, got fired by Universal Studios, watched his dreams collapse again and again before finally making it. And now Johnny Carson, a man who sat behind a desk telling jokes, was trying to tear him down. Tonight, Eastwood was going to confront him. On camera, in front of all of America, he had rehearsed exactly what he was going to say. He was going to expose Johnny Carson as a coward who attacked people from the safety of his desk. But here's what Clint Eastwood didn't know. In exactly 47 minutes, he would be sitting in Johnny Carson's private dressing room. The door would be closed. And Clint Eastwood, the man who never cried, not even in movies, would have tears running down his face. Not from anger, from something he never expected to feel. And what happened between these 2 American legends that night would remain a secret for decades. Until now. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. And if you believe that real strength has nothing to do with tough talk, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happened next will change how you see both of these men forever. Let me take you back to that cold April evening. The Tonight Show was the most powerful platform in America. 17 million people watched every single night. Johnny Carson could make a career with 1 good interview, or destroy it with 1 bad joke. And for reasons nobody fully understood, Carson had made Clint Eastwood his target. The jokes started small. Little jabs about his squint, about his quiet voice, about how he played the same character in every movie. But then they got meaner. Clint Eastwood is proof that you don't need talent in Hollywood. You just need a good squint and a fast horse. The audience roared. America repeated the jokes at water coolers, and Clint Eastwood heard every single one. What nobody knew was why Carson was doing this. Because behind the desk, behind the perfect suits and the legendary timing, Johnny Carson was falling apart. His second marriage was ending in a brutal public divorce. His 3 sons barely spoke to him. He drank alone in his dressing room before every show, trying to quiet the voice in his head that told him he was a fraud. And that voice belonged to his mother. Ruth Carson had never once told her son she was proud of him. When he won his first Emmy, she said, "Well, I suppose they know what they're doing." When he sent her a mink coat, she mailed it back, too fancy for Nebraska. Johnny Carson made America laugh every night, but he couldn't make his own mother smile. So he did what hurt people do. He found someone successful, someone confident, someone who seemed to have everything he didn't. And he tore that person down. Clint Eastwood had no idea he was walking into a battlefield that had nothing to do with him. He thought this was about jokes. It wasn't. It was about 2 broken men who had been carrying the same wound their entire lives. And when they finally faced each other that night, something nobody planned was about to happen. Something that would change both of them forever. Clint Eastwood arrived at NBC Studios 2 hours early. He was 43 years old, 6'4", lean and hard from years of doing his own stunts. He wore a simple leather jacket and boots that had seen real dirt, not Hollywood prop departments. The production assistant who greeted him was visibly nervous.
Mr. Eastwood, the green room is right this way. Mr. Carson doesn't usually meet guests before the show.
Eastwood's voice was ice. I'm not going to the green room. Where's Carson's dressing room?
Sir, I really don't think—
I didn't ask what you think. The assistant pointed down the hallway. Eastwood walked toward it like a man walking into a gunfight. Every step deliberate, every muscle coiled. What he didn't know was what waited behind that door. Johnny Carson sat alone, staring at a photograph he kept hidden in his desk drawer. It was a picture of his mother, taken years ago in Nebraska. He was 47 years old, the most watched man in America, worth more than most movie stars. And right now, he felt like a complete failure. His lawyer had called that morning. The divorce would cost him millions. His ex-wife was talking to reporters. His sons had stopped returning his calls. And through it all, his mother's voice echoed in his head. That wasn't funny, Johnny. That's what she had said. During a magazine interview, a reporter had watched The Tonight Show with Ruth Carson. And when Johnny delivered his monologue, the monologue that made 17 million people laugh, his mother had frowned and said, "That wasn't funny." Then she left the room. The magazine printed it. America read it. And Johnny Carson never recovered. He had spent his entire life trying to make that woman proud. He had become the biggest star in television history, and it still wasn't enough. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. "Mr. Carson, Clint Eastwood is here. He says he needs to see you. Now." Carson put the photograph back in the drawer. He straightened his tie. He took a breath. "Send him in." The door swung open, and there stood Clint Eastwood, filling the doorway, his famous squint fixed directly on Johnny Carson. Two American icons, one small room, and a conversation that would never be broadcast, but would change everything. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened in the next 15 minutes has never been told publicly until now. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Eastwood didn't wait for small talk. "You've been making jokes about me for months on national television." His voice was low and controlled, but there was something underneath it, something dangerous. Carson didn't flinch. "Yes, I have." "Why?" Carson was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Eastwood didn't expect. "Close the door. Sit down." Eastwood hesitated. He had come here for a fight. This didn't feel like a fight. Slowly, he closed the door, but he didn't sit. "I didn't claw my way out of poverty to be a punchline for a man who sits behind a desk." Carson nodded. "You're right. The jokes weren't fair. They weren't even that funny." "Then why?" Carson looked at Eastwood for a long moment, and then he said something that changed everything. "Because you have something I've never had, and I hate you for it." Eastwood frowned. "What are you talking about? You're the biggest star in television." "I'm talking about your eyes." "My eyes?" When you walk onto a set, people see a man who knows exactly who he is. No apologies, no performance, just you. Carson's voice cracked slightly. "I've never felt that way. Not once in my entire life." The room went quiet. Eastwood stared at Carson, and for the first time, he saw something he recognized. Fear. "You think I don't have doubts?" Eastwood said quietly. "You? Dirty Harry? Dirty Harry is a character. I'm the guy who got fired from Universal because my Adam's apple was too big. I'm the guy who dug swimming pools while my own family told me to give up and get a real job. He finally sat down. You want to know my secret? I'm terrified every single day. I just don't let it show. Carson leaned back. His eyes were wet. My mother has never once told me she's proud of me. Not when I got this show, not when I won every award television has to offer. Nothing. Eastwood was quiet. Then he said, when I got my first big role, my mother said, don't get too comfortable. Hollywood throws people away. Carson laughed bitterly. Mine said, that wasn't funny, while watching my own show, and a reporter printed it. For a moment, neither man spoke. Two of the most powerful men in entertainment, both still wounded by the same thing. Mothers who couldn't give them what they needed most. A simple, I'm proud of you. I came here to tear you down, Eastwood finally said. I know. But I'm looking at you, Carson, and I see a guy who's fighting the same fight I am. Different battlefield, same war. Carson nodded slowly. I'm sorry about the jokes. They were cheap shots. I was taking my own garbage out on you. Eastwood extended his hand. Then let's stop fighting each other. We've got enough real enemies. Carson took his hand, and in that small dressing room, something shifted. Two men who walked in as adversaries walked out as something else entirely. But the real surprise was what happened when the cameras started rolling. The studio audience had no idea what had just happened. They saw Johnny Carson return from commercial break with his usual smile. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Clint Eastwood. The applause was thunderous. Everyone expected tension. Two alpha males, Hollywood drama. They got something completely different. Eastwood walked out, and he was smiling. Not the tight smirk from his movies, a real smile. He shook Carson's hand. Then he did something that made the audience gasp. He hugged him. Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, the man with no name, hugging Johnny Carson on national television. Carson laughed, and it wasn't his television laugh. It was real. Well, Carson said, I think we just broke about 15 rules. What followed was unlike any Tonight Show interview in history. Eastwood talked about being fired from Universal, about digging pools in the blazing California sun, about being told his voice was too soft, his Adam's apple too big, his talent too small. And then Carson did something he never did. He talked about himself. I've made some jokes about this man, Carson said, looking at Eastwood, and I owe him an apology. The audience fell silent. The truth is, Clint Eastwood does something I've never been able to do. He walks through life being exactly who he is. No mask, no character, just himself. He paused. I've been wearing a mask so long I forgot what's underneath. Eastwood leaned forward. And Johnny Carson has done something even harder. He's made America laugh every night for over a decade while carrying burdens nobody sees. He looked directly at the audience. That's not a fraud. That's the bravest man I know. The studio was completely silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another, and another. Within seconds, 40 million Americans were witnessing a standing ovation for two men who had just shown them what real strength looks like. Not the absence of pain, the courage to share it. That moment became one of the most talked about episodes in Tonight Show history. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling was even more remarkable. Drop a comment if this story is hitting different for you. And tell me, where are you watching from right now? I want to know how far this story is traveling tonight. Hit that subscribe button right now. The newspapers went crazy the next morning. Eastwood and Carson, the interview that shocked America. But what the papers didn't report was what happened next. 3 weeks after the broadcast, Johnny Carson invited Clint Eastwood to dinner at his home in Malibu. Eastwood accepted. They sat on Carson's patio, watching the Pacific Ocean, and they talked. Not about Hollywood, not about ratings or box office numbers.
They talked about their fathers, who were never around. They talked about their mothers, who were never satisfied. They talked about success and how empty it can feel when you're still trying to impress someone who will never be impressed.
"You know what I realized that night?" Carson said.
What?
"We're both still trying to prove something to people who are never going to give us what we need."
Eastwood nodded slowly. Maybe that's what drives us. The wound that won't heal.
"Or maybe," Carson said, "we can finally stop performing for ghosts."
They became friends that night. Real friends. The kind who call each other at midnight when the darkness gets too heavy. Years later, when Johnny Carson died in 2005, his wife found something in his bedroom closet. A box of memories. Inside was a handwritten note from Clint Eastwood.
It said, "To the bravest fraud I ever met.
Thanks for teaching me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and getting back up. Your friend always, Clint." Carson had kept that note for over 30 years. Right next to the box of newspaper clippings his mother had saved but never shown him. Here's what 40 million people learned that night, even if they didn't realize it. The toughest men are often the most wounded. The funniest people are often the saddest. And the only way to truly connect with another human being is to stop pretending you have it all figured out. Clint Eastwood walked into NBC studios ready to destroy Johnny Carson. Instead, he found a man fighting the same battle he'd been fighting his whole life. And in that recognition, in that moment of shared pain, something healed in both of them. Johnny Carson spent his entire career making America laugh. Clint Eastwood spent his entire career making America believe in heroes.
But on one night in 1973, they gave America something more valuable. They showed us that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the foundation of every real friendship, every real connection, every real moment of healing. And maybe that's the lesson. We're all walking around carrying wounds we don't talk about, looking at other people and assuming they have it all together. But nobody has it all together. Not Johnny Carson, not Clint Eastwood, not you, not me. And the moment we stop pretending, that's the moment we finally find each other. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Subscribe for more stories about the moments that changed American legends forever. And tell me in the comments, have you ever connected with someone you thought was your enemy? Because sometimes, the person we're fighting is the one person who truly understands us.